Start
Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. Good to see you, Eric.
I'm Raymond Peterson. Good to see you, Bob. Eric.
Hey guys, here we are back into the breach. And thanks to Manhattan Neighborhood Network and AVT Educational Productions, we will do some analysis, maybe some commentary on what's breaking in the news, what should be discussed in the news. So we're pre-taping, which is normally our want. And by the time this airs next Monday, we will be probably feeling some of the, not after effects, but the reaction to Muhammad Ali's going home service in Louisville, right? Because it's supposed to happen 2 days from now on a Friday, which is the Friday before we air. So I think that's a good way to jump off with Ali and his significance, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. You were talking about the impact that Ali had on you. I agree with you 100%, a man who stood up for his rights and his beliefs. But I want to tell everybody out there, people who may not have ever met him, that the media, anything you read about him, anything you see about him, belies his real stature and the aura that he presents when he is around. I never met the man personally, but I had occasion to be walking down the street one day, and all of a sudden I was in the middle of a crowd. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I'm looking around, and there he is, bigger than life. And I was surprised as his hand reached out past me to shake somebody's hand. I realized that his palm was as big as my face. So he was not only big in his beliefs, he was big in stature. He was huge. He was
about
really
205 in his prime.
It took me weeks to get over how just his presence and his physical stature was just incredible.
I mean,
indeed.
You're right. I met him just once. I met him actually in front of the old RKO Albee Theater in Brooklyn. And just like you, it was a big crowd, so you really couldn't get that close. But as he left, he sort of swung his hand through the crowd, gave everybody a sweeping high five, and my hand caught one of them. And I remember the hand feeling really thick and tough and hard, and I have big hands myself, but his hands were substantially stronger. But you're right, his aura sort of affects you right away.
Absolutely.
And the wide shoulders and just the presence, it's like you see him personally, and then you see the media coverage, and you realize it's two different things.
Yeah, one of my main regrets is never physically meeting him in person, even though there could have been some opportunities, because when they were doing those fights in the 70s, I know he was at the ABC building over on 66th Street. I know Joe Frazier was there as well. Actually, I ended up with some ABC folks with Joe Frazier in a Playboy club over there on 57th Street.
Okay.
I don't know how that transpired. And Joe Frazier is actually a very nice guy, but unfortunately, he was up against the greatest.
Right.
But I'm going to be honest. I got to tell you, Ali had to grow on me because I'm like about 3 years older than Ali. And I come out of this growing up in New York. We're very low-key, laid-back, Mr. Cool kinds of, we may tell you we're going to kick your rear end, but we whisper it to you softly, and then we go about doing it. And we'll only say it once, and then we'll go about doing it, whether it's on a basketball court or whatever. So for me and people of my generation who are used to that kind of style, Ali with that Louisville lip braggadocio, I'm going to do you in, and I'm going to do verbally, nonstop, in that loud braggadocio way. I just shook my head and said, where is this kid coming from? What is this that's just dropped on the planet? I'll be perfectly honest with you. But what I realized in watching all this lip and all his interaction with media, because he was such a magnet that they would not stop covering him and that lip. He backed up everything he said. He backed up everything he said. Promises he made, he delivered on. And so, as I believe he himself once said, it ain't bragging if you back it up. And so I became an Ali fan, but I can tell you exactly when I became an Ali fan. And that wasn't when he was winning. It was in one of those Frazier fights. I believe it was the 71 fight where Joe Frazier knocked him down. And I'll never forget it because I was working the news desk at ABC that night of that fight. And whoever was running that tape machine or whoever was directing it, they played that knockdown as if it was on a loop. I mean, to the point where I started to get sick and angry just watching them recycle Ali being knocked down. So I know exactly how a lot of people felt in their antipathy for Ali, because when they had the opportunity to see him at his, quote, lowest, they made sure they rubbed that in by recycling that over and over. And that made me a serious Muhammad Ali fan, because I said to myself, okay, you can run this tape over and over, but in my heart of hearts, I know this kid's gonna get up. I'm pretty sure I said this kid. I said this kid's gonna get back up, and sure enough, he did. So, but for me, Ali was more than a great boxer, and we're gonna use this to segue to all our other coverage, because Ali passed the day after the ending of the Roots miniseries reboot. And the Roots miniseries reboot I watched assiduously because, you know, Ray, we did Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home in its entirety, video and audio, and that covered that historical arc of African Americans trying to come out of slavery after being snatched over from Africa here. And so, you know, Roots was good, but it wasn't historically well nuanced or as accurate as it could have been, especially in dealing with how black people rebelled, revolted, resisted. The whole resistance and rebellion wasn't just taking up arms and just running away. There were a lot of nuanced stuff to it. And so Ali's standing up for his principles when he did in 1960, a man who said, I'm not going to fight your war in Vietnam because of my religious beliefs. I'm not going because those people 1,000 miles away did nothing to me, so why should I pick up a gun and try to do something to them? He didn't dodge the draft. He just said, I'm a conscientious objector. It's against my beliefs. I'm not going to do that. A whole lot of other people dodged the draft and went to Canada, etc. He said, I won't go. I'm willing to pay the price, and he paid the price. He was at the height of his powers, right?
And I wanted to hear that from you because you're a veteran. I mean, you're not just a journalist and a videographer. You're a veteran. You're a veteran yourself. So when he said that he wasn't going to serve in the military because of his beliefs, you saw through the rhetoric. You could see that it was his passion for his religion and his inability to shoot other people of color.
The man, you're right. The man said, I don't subscribe to that because of my religion. I'm not going to do it. And there are a number of other conscientious objectors in this country, but guess what? 9 times out of 10, they went to jail. Eugene Debs, way back in World War I or whichever, he was a conscientious objector. He was also a socialist, so guess what? They threw his rear end in jail because they didn't like his politics. They didn't like Ali's politics, they didn't like his religion, they didn't like his arrogance, and so you know they were not going to let him be a conscientious objector and not go to jail. And so he was willing to pay the price, and he did. But what they did was they snatched his freedom to pursue his career. And I tie it to that Roots rebellion because the payoff punchline, spoiler alert, folk, you need to watch the series, but one of the main characters in the final episode, his dad said to him, we've finally done it, we've gotten our freedom, we are now free, we can go lead our lives and do what we should for our family. The kid looked at his father and said, yeah, Dad, we're now free, but we're going to have to fight for this freedom every day of our lives, because every day of our lives, somebody's going to be trying to take it away from us. And he was right.
Absolutely, yeah. And we are fighting every day.
Yes, we are. Which segues to talk to me about felony lynching. That's another example of how these people in power will try to take our freedom away. Segue, felony lynching.
Well, felony lynching is, it's not an absurd term. It derived from the days when black folk were being pulled out of jails by a lynch mob. But the law also states it's defined as a riot with people intent on lynching a person. Has nothing to do with trying to just grab somebody who's being arrested.
But their definition of lynching is if you physically try to take control of
Control
somebody from
of
the authorities.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that's how they use the term lynching. Well, we bring this up, folk, because a Black Lives Matter organizer in California, and I believe the town was, correct me if I'm wrong,
Pasadena.
Ray, tell us that story. You know more about it than I do.
I'm sorry.
name?
The young lady's name was Jasmine Richards.
Right.
So she was one of the founders of Black Lives Matter in Pasadena, if not indeed the founder of Black Lives Matter. They were leading a peaceful demonstration for justice for another young black man who was killed by police, which is another story in itself.
Unarmed black man shot
An
back
unarmed
out.
black man, young man, 19-year-old man. Apparently, she intervened in a situation where a woman who had been accused of not paying her restaurant bill, she tried to intervene in this. And she was not arrested on the spot, which I find interesting. She was not arrested on the spot.
Okay, let's make this very clear to our viewing audience. So she tried to, quote, intervene on the lady's behalf because the lady was accused of not paying her bill, and so she and maybe one or two others were upset that this lady was being roughed up by the restaurant people, unfairly treated, and they tried to intervene.
Exactly.
And so nothing happened that day
Nothing
at
happened
that
that
site.
day. Nope. It took them, not an hour later, not the next day. It took them 4 days to come and arrest her for this incident.
Okay, so connect the dots.
Exactly.
Somebody who's standing up for not just her rights,
She's
somebody else's rights. The authorities not too happy with the fact that she, quote, interfered
Right.
with whatever was going on. And so her liberty was just abrogated by the police 4 days later.
Somebody
let's
saw
not-
somebody saw an opportunity.
Exactly. As you said earlier, what do you do to stop a movement? You cut off the head of the snake.
Okay, and so when Ali stands up for his principles and his rights as a citizen of the country, being a conscientious observer, they say, no, we don't like that, you go to jail.
Right.
And this young lady stands up for somebody else's rights, says, no, we don't like that. We'll find an obscure law, 1933, passed in California, folks. And so they whip out this law, and they snatched her and put her on trial, and the outcome was she was actually convicted.
Yeah.
So
That was today,
actually,
wasn't it?
today she actually got her sentence. So
Sentencing today.
this Wednesday when we're taping, correct me if I'm wrong, instead of getting 4 years, she got...
Right. She could have gotten 4 years. She could have gotten up to 4 years, but today she was sentenced to 90 days, including, I think, deducting 18 days of time served.
already served?
No.
All right. So maybe the judge heard some of the outrage protests that social media had generated as a result of the fact that this young lady was, quote, arrested on an obscenely named law known as felony lynching. As her lawyer said, it's really, really not ironic, but almost obscene, paraphrasing, that a black female would be convicted on a law that was designed to protect black people from being actually physically lynched in the state of California. And yeah, but that harks back to the fact that we have to fight for our freedom and our rights every single day. Which brings me to the other assault that we have on the rights of black and brown and poor and young people, because all these voter registration laws, all these voter ID laws, all this stuff, that one Republican elected official actually had the nerve, but maybe stupidity, to admit were designed to make sure Republicans got elected to office. Guy came right out and said it. I think we mentioned that on one of the Media Watch shows before. So yeah, it's designed to make sure we can get elected. We don't want all these brown and poor people registering to vote. So that's just another example of you have to fight every day for these rights that we have had to fight for 400 plus years in this country. And this is all part of the electoral process, which of course we cannot get away from because we're taping the day after the California, New Jersey, North, South Dakota, a bunch of other state primaries and caucuses that basically pretty much push Hillary Clinton over the top as far as the delegates she needs to secure the nomination for the being the official candidate of the Democratic Party for the presidential election in the fall. What's your take on what that means to the state of the race right now vis-a-vis Bernie Sanders and
Well,
what may be in store?
They say that Hillary Clinton won the California primary, and indeed she probably did. But I was reading in The Guardian today that there were a lot of voting problems in California, especially Los Angeles County. People were showing up at the polls. The machines weren't working. This wasn't there. They weren't in the roll books. Their names weren't on the roll. An interesting side to that is one guy protested. Most people were given provisional ballots, which are not counted right away. They're counted after the fact. He said, well, I'm not going to do that. I want to see somebody. I want to see a supervisor. 45 minutes later, the machine that wasn't working previously was all of a sudden working, which might be a coincidence.
But it's troubling.
You know, it's very troubling.
Oh,
It seems like they're almost practicing for the general election, practicing shenanigans.
So, we don't have dangling chads,
Yes.
so we're going to have non-working machines. And
listen, I was trying to call it up. I think it was on one of the RSN.
Yeah, it was.
News.
Yeah.
But there was a Greg Palast. We quote Greg Palast in RSN and some of these other aggregations places, and usually he writes for The Guardian. His headline was, "Okay, California election stolen," whatever.
Oh, didn't he actually say that?
That's his headline. It's not mix-ups.
Right.
Palast comes right out and pretty much accuses that half of the Democratic Party of stealing the California primary. I didn't read the story, I just read the headline, but knowing it's Greg Palast, I'm sure he outlined why he thought it was stolen. But that was California Democratic side. There was anything for Donald Trump? I know he got the Dakotas, etc. But pretty much most of Trump's day yesterday, when they were waiting for his speech for whatever, was in supposedly trying to put out the fire that he himself had caused. Bob, you've been following the story about Trump and the judge?
Well, I mean, I noticed that when Trump was speaking yesterday or the day before, he was working off a teleprompter, which is telling me that he's trying to avoid putting his foot in his mouth at his public appearances. But his latest his latest foot in the mouth, his allegation that the judge reviewing his
Trump University fraud case,
the Trump being of having some Mexican heritage couldn't possibly be fair to him, just because of his he's the judge is
second generation.
Yes, American.
Doesn't know Mexico. I never laid
exactly.
Unless he visited relatives a long time ago.
But first, I heard Trump say that, and I said, okay, he's gonna circle back and remove some of that foot out of his mouth, and then he appears on the network news and basically reiterates what he said, which just drives in the point that he needs counseling. I just don't know where he can go from here because he's so far away from reality with some of what he says. I just can't fathom him as a real candidate, but yet he is.
Here he is, yeah.
Well, see, that takes me to a couple of points that we talked about before we started rolling. Media-wise, we've never had a problem saying that Trump is racist, not just accidentally putting his foot in his mouth.
And we try to give him rope.
But he keeps doing and saying the same thing. So when people tell us who they are, we accept it, and then we tell our viewers, yeah, that's who he is. He's a racist, xenophobic, whatever else you want to call from all the statements he's made. The problem is everybody keeps trying to make excuses for this man about, well, he himself is now saying, oh, my comments were misconstrued about the judge. how misconstrued can you be when you say, hey, I'm building a wall. I'm building a wall with Mexico. I'm going to get Mexico to pay for it. The judge doesn't like that because he's Mexican.
Right.
He hates Donald Trump. Hey, the guy's telling you who he is. You can't misconstrue that. I mean, those were pretty much close to the exact words he used that I just screamed out at our viewing audience. Who's going to make more excuses for him? He's racist. He's xenophobic. That's why he's building his wall that he's going to make Mexico pay for. We've said it more than once. The only interesting thing now between the judge and Trump is somebody finally woke up. Hillary Clinton came out and actually lambasted him last week with all guns firing for who he is, what he said, etc. And Dan Rather, yes, folks, Dan Rather is still alive and well and doing media things, actually came out and lambasted the entire journalistic profession for letting Donald Trump have the free ride that he's been having for the last 12 months. He was totally appalled at why this guy hasn't been called for the stuff he's been doing, the stuff he's been saying, why the media's been failing to cover him properly. And I keep saying, most of the Media Watch has been telling it like it is about this guy from day one. But when you put the fact that finally the presumptive Democratic nominee finally came out with all guns firing at this guy and saying exactly who he is and what needs to be said, and a veteran media person like Rather finally calling the rest of the media out for not doing their job properly, then maybe something is finally waking up. We had a discussion, I think, talking about Donald Trump would disappear if every comedian in the country would actually deal with him as the absurd buffoon that he is on their comedic routine, just like George Carlin used to do, just like Lenny Bruce used to do. If all these comics would just get up and skewer this guy with their humor, his balloon would puncture and he would float away. But people keep trying to cover him like he's a real person in a real situation when he's just an overblown racist buffoon who is trying to ride disaffection in this country to the White House.
But another problem is that there seems to be a long line of apologists lining up at any given moment to say, oh, he didn't mean this, he meant that. I mean, not just from the media. I saw a veterans group came out in support of Trump. And they said, oh, we support him for this, this, and this. And, of course, they used the line, he's going to make America great again. And it just seems like there are so many people available just to say, no, Trump isn't that bad. So it's not just the media. The groups are out there.
Yeah, they are. But what does that tell you about America?
It scares me.
It scares me, too.
Yeah.
But,
that's an excellent point.
Well, yeah, you're right.
It backs me off.
But here's the thing. Donald Trump, because he's tapped all those disaffected, left out, left behind people in poor, lower middle America that feels like the rest of the country has recovered and they have not, and they're correct, because as we're taping, the stock market just hit 18,000 plus today. Probably be back down next week when we hear. But Wall Street's recovered fine. The old cliche, Main Street's still out there sucking wind, okay? And so all those people are still not happy. Now, President Obama went to Elkhart, Indiana last week, did a town meeting with Gwen Ifill of PBS, and they profiled the town, and the town had totally went down the tubes.
Right.
When the meltdown occurred.
The old industrial town.
It just went totally down the tubes. And because of the stuff that the Obama administration did, they finally clawed themselves back out. It's not as good as it used to be, but they're not in the state of total depression that they were. And you know what? Most of the folk in that town have no likes for Barack Obama because they're buying the Trump line that he's done nothing for them. Now, they may be right if they consider the fact that they're not as well off as they were before 2008, but if he hadn't done what he did, and use whatever bailout financial jujitsu he and his people did, they'd be in a deeper hole than before 2008.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'd be short 2 auto companies today if it wasn't for Barack Obama. I mean,
Yeah.
really, Ford didn't take any money, but really, it's amazing when you hear some of the rhetoric. Of course, yes, a lot of cities are still in decline. Detroit's might have bottomed out. They might be coming back. Yeah. So they have actually snippets of hope out there.
Well, that RV industry at least is starting to come back. The ones that totally tanked when
You're right.
when he did the bailout deal. But it has to do with perception. It has to do with
Right.
media. You had something you want to talk
I
to us
was gonna
about
say-
media.
Well, Theo, but I wanted to
Go.
comment on this. You know, the people that are backing Trump are not all racist. They're not all bigots.
Right.
They're disenfranchised, and I understand that. But their anger is misplaced.
Right.
You know, it's not Barack Obama. It's our government, the way it's structured, the way it functions. It's not surprising to me that 90% of the wealth is held by 2% of the people.
Of
You know,
course.
there's a reason for that, and they keep it that way, and they want to keep it that way. And the way they do that is they pit us against each other. They keep us poor. They keep us uneducated. I'm not just talking about blacks. I'm talking about white and black.
No,
It's
divide
our,
and conquer.
yes, it
Yeah.
is,
And
and
we're-
it's
we're-
been going on, and we're an easy target.
Yes.
You know, but don't forget there are a lot of white people in this country that are doing just as bad as black people.
And we have about a minute left.
Yeah. We can't talk about
Peter Thiel.
the billionaire guy who's backing
Peter Thiel.
all
I
these
think it's
suits.
Peter.
Yeah,
Peter?
yes.
Yeah, the guy out in Silicon Valley, Peter Thiel, whatever his name is, he backed the Hulk Hogan suit against Gawker, and he
Undermined
says
Acorn.
He,
Yes.
Undermined
he's the one
Acorn.
who helped pre-funded the guy who helped fund the guy who did the bogus video that totally torpedoed Acorn. And so what you have is another billionaire. You got one billionaire trying to
Yes.
become president. You got another billionaire trying to undermine mainstream media, which some of it does need to be undermined, but we still need a First Amendment. We still need a free press. And so when people try to use their money to sabotage that, we have to watch out for that. So
15.
we got more stuff that we can talk about, but we're out of time. So I'm Eric Tait,
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Raymond Peterson.
and this has been Media Watch. Thanks MNN, and thanks EBT Educational Productions, and we'll catch you the next time, folks.
Yep.